I got into the early playtesting for Rogue Core and I've been playing it quite a bit now. It's a very fun experience so far, but that's exactly what it is, an experience, not a game. There is a lot still missing and that's okay because that's precisely why they opened it so early for playtesting. They want our feedback to help build the game in the right direction. So I'll be giving my unsolicited and quite frankly unqualified advice as someone who's played a lot of roguelite games. Just a quick disclaimer, these ideas are just my opinion. If you disagree with them, that's fine. I am most certainly not inferring that I know better than the developers of Rogue Core. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get into my comprehensive list of changes I'd make to Rogue Core. This video is quite a yap sesh, so for ease of viewing I've included chapters in the description and along the progress bar so you can skip ahead or rewatch sections at your convenience. Ghost Ship Games has mentioned numerous times how they want Rogue Core to look and feel completely different to Deep Rock Galactic. I think that begins with the assignment layout and by extension the gameplay loop. In Deep Rock Galactic you begin a mission by going to the terminal and selecting your mission. Sure, you could do a similar layout in Rogue Core and have each of these be a new facility, but what if I told you there could be a more unique way of presenting missions? Instead, each time you go to the terminal you select a difficulty and then you start an assignment that randomly generates a Slay the Spire style map, where each facility leads into the next in branching paths. Each facility along the path will have a predetermined biome and modifiers. You choose your own path through the mission, always progressing from left to right until you reach the final mission, which will be a unique boss battle style mission. Each path you choose will come with its own boost. However, these boosts carry over for the full assignment, whereas the upgrades you choose within each facility will reset after you beat each mission. This will give you some upgrades that carry over for the full duration of the assignment to help you clear the later facilities as they get progressively harder. These boosts are shared by the team so everyone gets the same upgrade. There would also be general upgrades and not something class or weapon specific. So you wouldn't see plus 10 acid damage, but instead plus 10 movement speed or reload speed to ensure these boosts are designed to help the team as a whole and not just one person in the team. Roughly halfway through the assignment there'll be shops where you can buy additional unique boosts that carry over for the full assignment as well. These shop boosts can be bought with currency that is hidden throughout the cave. This currency could be gold you can mine if you want to boost halfway through the assignment. However, you will usually have to search for it throughout the cave, meaning it may waste some time in a mission where every minute matters. The second option for this shop mechanic is using Exponite as the currency. Any spare Exponite you have left over within Ellis after each facility ends can be used to buy these shop boosts. After you clear a facility, you would choose to either bank the Exponite to spend in shops later, or let it roll over into the next facility to give you your first upgrade sooner. Facilities slowly increase in difficulty towards the end, so these permanent boosts you choose along the path do matter. You will have to pick the most optimal route based on your team's strengths and playstyle. Some routes can also have negative modifiers along these positives, so pre-planning the most optimal route from the beginning really matters. These negative modifiers are similar to the in-mission ones, where they will be added to the stack of negative modifiers, however they won't carry over into future facilities. The further you get in the assignment, the bigger the reward multiplier becomes. This multiplier will determine your payout for in-game currency that you can use for permanent upgrades you apply outside of missions, like upgrading weapons, perks, equipment, and overclocks. If you fail a facility, the assignment ends and you will need to create a new randomly generated assignment at the terminal. Every boost you received along the path will fully reset and you start the new run from scratch. The boost system will allow for more long-term progression within your roguelite journey, allowing you to build more unique and synergistic runs. The current system only allows for a handful of upgrades max per facility. This means you never really progress your character very far before you're forced to reset them anyway. I don't know if Ghost Ship Games is implementing a hazard level system. All I have to go off is the 3 facilities in the playtest. I have played all 3 solo and would probably equate their DRG equivalent to hazard 3, 4 and 5 respectively. I don't know if these 3 facilities they give us in the playtest are supposed to be a mixed selection of difficulties or if these 3 missions are essentially the first 3 levels in the full game and they'll only get harder from there. But if these 3 levels are the easiest in the full game, then I could definitively say this game will be too difficult. Now hear me out though before you start typing skill issue in the comments. Not everyone wants to play a hard game. Ghost Ship Games have already mentioned their current plan is to make each facility progressively harder until you hit a skill ceiling where you can no longer progress. This is where your permanent character upgrades will come in. You will then have to replay earlier facilities until you level up enough to progress further. While I do like this idea overall, it comes with a potential huge risk. If a casual player hits their skill ceiling early on, let's say facility 3, they will be forced to replay the same facilities endlessly until they grind enough levels to progress further. This will feel very restrictive and likely make them feel like they are not progressing. You're also essentially gatekeeping the rest of the game behind a skill ceiling, rather than giving them a whole game experience to play by letting them choose their own difficulty as they progress through levels. This is why I like my Slay the Spire style campaign layout. It allows people to experience their full playthrough at any difficulty they choose. And when they're ready to progress, they can choose a new assignment at the next hazard level. This is where at some point they would hit the skill ceiling. While an assignment at the first hazard level is something most people would be able to complete without hitting a skill ceiling, the second and third hazard is where most people will get stuck and have to start grinding levels to progress. This is where the permanent progression grind can begin for those hardcore completionist gamers, whereas casual gamers can experience their own playthrough without having to partake in that gameplay grind. So how difficult should Hazard 1 be? While it should in no way equate to the same difficulty of Hazard 1 in Deep Rock Galactic, they'll be way too easy and quite frankly boring for this type of game. It should be slightly challenging for people who are completely new to roguelite games or Deep Rock Galactic, while giving them enough breathing room to learn the ropes throughout the first few facilities. Most people would be able to beat the first assignment on their first attempt. However, it should start to get challenging towards the end. The idea is that a Hazard 1 playthrough is entirely possible for new players while keeping it exciting with some intense moments. Your second playthrough at Hazard 1 should then be considered easy. This is then your casual playthrough difficulty for people who just want to cruise through the missions. Hazard 2 through 5 is for people who are looking for more of a challenge and are willing to grind their player level higher to break through these eventual skill ceilings, thus giving a fun experience for every level of player skill. It's important to not force people to play a high difficulty game if they'd rather play casually. If Ghost Ship Games wants Rogue Core to be a challenging game, they need to incentivize playing higher hazards rather than not giving players an easy mode. They can do this by giving higher XP and chip payouts at higher hazard levels, and even giving unique rewards upon beating certain hazard levels like exclusive cosmetics and emotes. One of the most important elements of game design is rewarding people for playing the way you want, rather than punishing them for playing the way you don't. Games are supposed to be fun. Give players the freedom to play the way they want. They are not going to come back to a game where they can barely beat the third level because the game only has a hard mode. Boss battles are entirely unique mission types only playable by getting to the very end of an assignment. This unique mission type serves two functions simultaneously. First, to reward players for making it to the end of the assignment, and second, to encourage cooperative gameplay. Since the missions get progressively harder towards the end, players will need to work together to synergize their builds if they hope to make it to the final unique boss battle. What exactly would these boss battles consist of? Well, just like every other facility, you will first have to make it through all of the levels until you reach the final level. Here is where you play the final special boss battle, which would consist of potentially any one of the three following ideas: core stabilization, rescue operation, or minehead extraction. Core stabilization. This mission will have you head deep inside a facility built around a strange glowing orb called the core, in order to restabilize this core and stop whatever it is causing this communication greyout. This final level will be a network of tunnels and paths built out of man-made structure rather than just a cave like most levels. You will have to make it to the center of this facility, which will consist of a large room with a glowing sphere floating in the middle of the room. Around the core are four structures that look like large lasers pointing inwards towards the core. Each of these lasers will need to be turned on to commence the core stabilization process and trigger the endless swarm of bugs as the core is stabilized. These lasers will need to be maintained or they will break down and stop the stabilization process. Once the stabilization is complete, the core will stop glowing as the swarms die down. Mission control chimes in now that the greyout is finally gone.
Congratulations, the core is stabilized and communication has been restored. I knew you could do it, team. Now head back for Cult 1 and
What's this? Mission control is cutting out again. And what's worse, it looks like the core is starting to crack open again. Omen chimes back in again, telling the team the core is unstable again. It's about to go critical. Get out before it's too late. And so, the celebration is cut short and instead an extraction sequence starts. You will need to make it to the exit as the facility explodes around the team. These explosions aren't physics-based and won't hurt the team. It's purely for a cool cinematic ending. The bugs are the main threat here. If you don't make it to the exit before the timer reaches 0, a bigger explosion will automatically kill the team and the mission fails. Rescue operation. This mission would play out similar to a regular escort duty, but with some changes. Your job will be to locate the lost mining team halfway through the mission and lead them to the extract at the far side of the cave. You wouldn't actually see the dwarves you're rescuing, but instead they would be inside a medical cart similar to DrDevvi that you would have to lead to the extract and keep safe throughout the mission. When you approach the cart, you'll get a voice line from the dwarves informing you they are injured and they need your help to make it to the extraction zone. Minehead extraction. This mission will have the team reach a huge mining rig responsible for extracting large amounts of expedite from a natural geode cluster located in the cave. The only problem is as soon as you disturb this cluster, every bug within a 50-kilometer radius gets rather upset. It also looks like it ended pretty poorly for the last team that tried. The mining rig is partially destroyed with multiple fires around it. You will need to repair all the parts of the mining rig to get it back online and set up the defensive turrets around the perimeter. Once everything is back up and running, the rig can be started. This will commence an endless swarm and a timer showing how close you are to completing the mining operation. Throughout this, parts of the rig need to be maintained and the turrets need ammo. This ammo will be held in the middle of the rig in boxes that need to be physically carried and placed into the turrets to restock them, or they will eventually run out of ammo. If the rig falls too far into disrepair, the mining process will pause until it is back online. Once the mining process is complete, the normal mission extraction commences and the team will have to extract just like every normal mission. The rogue core lore will be established through interactable elements within facilities that are created randomly using the cave generation process, similar to how machine events and battery packs are randomly placed in locations and only sometimes in missions. There will be a predetermined list of potential lore elements that can be placed within each mission, and the further you get through the assignment, the juicier the lore drops become. These could be in the form of updates from mission control or broken equipment and documents you find hidden within the mission that slowly build upon the lore, giving us more clues towards what's actually going on with this greyout. This essentially presents the lore in Rogue Core as Easter egg content rather than the forced storyline interactions from other games, such as through cutscenes. This doesn't necessarily change the gameplay element of Rogue Core, but it does help to build a more narrative-driven experience. And the best part, since they are presented as more Easter eggs and things you have to go out of your way to find, if you don't care for the storyline, you can just ignore these things and carry on like usual, allowing for two completely different ways to play the game. And it just gives a few extra things for completionist gamers to do: uncover every piece of the lore. Permanent upgrades are unlocked outside of missions that will stick with your character even after the missions end. This is the main mechanic in place to help you progress into higher difficulties if you end up getting stuck on facilities. The permanent progression elements will fall into 5 different categories. Number 1, overclocks. You will need to unlock overclocks in new, unique ways different to machine events, because machine events wouldn't work in Rogue Core. Instead, it would be through level milestones or similar to the weapon masteries, but instead of unlocking paint jobs, you get overclocks as you level up each gun. Once overclocks are unlocked, they need to be equipped to weapons. This is not done outside of missions, however. You equip your overclocks within each facility from overclock machines, just like the equipment crates or weapon crates. These can sometimes be randomly generated, but usually you will have to select it from the options after you clear a level. In the overclock machine, you will be given 3 overclocks to choose from for each equipped weapon. These will be selected at random from your pool of unlocked overclocks for each gun. You will then pick one of these overclocks for each of your main weapons. Since this mechanic makes overclocks harder to acquire than in Deep Rock Galactic, it should be worth noting that overclocks in Rogue Core are supposed to be far more powerful and game-changing than the overclocks from Deep Rock Galactic. Number 2, weapon stat upgrades. These will be permanent stat boosts to guns you unlock within each gun's upgrade tree. These will boost things like damage, ammo, reload speed, etc. But only in small ways. A max gun would only do 10 to 20% more damage than base. These stat boosts are meant to give you a helping hand at higher hazards and not break the game entirely. Number 3, perks. This is pretty much what we already see in the game with the enhancements, but the list of available upgrades needs to be much higher. Since there's so many upgrades, it would make sense to split the skills into 2 trees. The first is everything related to survival, anything that boosts movement, health, and team-based abilities. The second is everything combat related, damage boosts, equipment cooldowns, and ammo. Number 4, equipment. Just like the weapon stat upgrades, the equipment can also be upgraded to boost their stats. As you upgrade equipment, you will increase its base level. Once you upgraded a zipline, for example, you will no longer see white level ziplines, only green and up, essentially meaning you'll start runs with equipment that will always be closer to gold level, until you reach the final level of equipment upgrade, where you would only see either purple or gold variants of that particular equipment. New equipment types can also be unlocked later in the game, as you wouldn't start with everything unlocked. These can include new grenade types and the addition of sentry guns. Sentry guns will have 3 unlockable variants: flamethrower to burn, sludge to slow, and shotgun to focus on close quarters protection. These sentry guns will behave differently to DRG, however. Once you place them, they are permanently down and break after they deplete their ammo. Sentry guns cannot be reloaded. Instead, you would have 2 deployable turrets that can only be restocked with the ammo resupplies. You can place your sentry guns whenever you want, but once they're down, they will stay down until they run out of ammo. This will force players to be more careful about where and when they use their sentries, as there will no longer be a fix-all solution. Number 5, cosmetics. Just like DRG, there should be a comprehensive list of cosmetics to drip out dwarves. Some of these can be unlocked with currency within a shop, others are unlocked through milestones or challenges, but most are unlocked through random loot drops in caves. It never feels like there's enough upgrades per run. Even on my best runs, I'll usually only get 8 to 10 upgrades, and that's only when I mine every schmeckle of Exponite and clear every event. Most games end before you can build an interesting and unique build that redefines a playstyle to make this run stand out from the rest. What this does is make each game feel somewhat similar to the last. There's just not enough upgrades to build anything that drastically changes the gameplay by the end of the mission. Either make the facilities longer to give more time to build, which is probably not the best choice considering missions are already quite long, or make it so you can get more expedite from ores, but each upgrade does slightly less. For example, instead of 30% buff, it does a 20% buff. This way you have more upgrades per run, giving you a more unique build without making your character too overpowered. In Deep Rock Galactic there's only one extraction type. The drop pod lands and you get in. Rogue Core should have multiple extraction types that are randomly chosen from a pool, so each mission has its own unique ending. The core principle of the extraction will remain the same, however. Complete objective at point A, a timer starts, get to point B before the timer ends. Leave no dwarf behind. Instead of a drop pod landing, the first extraction type could be that Deep Rock send in a new elevator and you and the team need to make it to that elevator before the time runs out. The second extraction type could be making it back to that scary wall. They've opened the gate again for us to get out, but they can only hold it for so long. So we'll have to make it back before the timer runs out and we are trapped in here forever. This doesn't really change the gameplay that much, but it does add some excitement to the end when you can never really be sure what extraction you'll get. Each equipment needs to have its own hotkeys. Currently you need to cycle between each tool by pressing the same button. This will usually lead to you not selecting the right tool for the job and potentially ending your run. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to pull out my platform gun, but because my flare gun is bound to the same button, well, let's just say gravity won that day. Instead, you should be able to open your inventory and drag equipment and weapons to their own slots to assign them to any hotkey you want. While we're on the topic of hotkeys, why are grenades bound to a hotkey and not just the G key? Sprint needs to be an always-on feature. I constantly find myself walking again and having to press shift again because I just mantled over something or bumped into an enemy. Not only would it be a great quality of life feature not having to constantly press shift again throughout the mission, but considering how fast-paced Rogue Core is supposed to be played, is there ever a situation where you're supposed to be walking anyway? Rogue Core desperately needs optimization to run better. My computer regularly struggles to play Rogue Core while streaming. In intense fights I usually get around 40 to 60 frames, even though I play on low settings. Now I know streaming alone takes a lot of resources, but my computer should be more than capable of streaming without even slight performance drops, considering I haven't encountered a game that drops frames while I stream. Now this could just be a me problem however, so I'd like to know how the game runs for everyone else. If you've got Rogue Core, how does its performance compare to Deep Rock Galactic? The last point in this segment is the calling the elevator section of the mission. This part of each mission is supposed to be this intense fight for survival while the elevator gets called in, but unfortunately it is anything but that after I discovered a little thing called training enemies. You can make the entire elevator section laughably easy by running in a large circle through the cave so that the bugs follow you in a nice little line and can't hit you. It's genuinely so easy I don't even shoot bugs anymore during this section, I just run. And as long as I don't run into any dead ends or accidentally circle back on myself, I can effectively cheese the whole final step in the level. So how do we fix this and make the elevator the intense fight for survival it was supposed to be? Most likely by having the elevator have an uplink zone just like the salvage missions. Now the uplink zone would have to be somewhat considerably larger than it is for the mules, since if you had to stand around the elevator the mission would be impossibly difficult. However, if the uplink was around 10 to 20 meters, large enough to really maneuver around with the team, but too small to run circles through the whole cave until the timer reaches 0. That concludes my comprehensive list of changes I'd make to Rogue Core. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative, because if even one of my ideas helped Ghost Ship games in any small way, I'd consider this video a success. Remember, these ideas are just my opinion, so if you disagree with any, please let me know in the comments and let's get a discussion going. And if you have any ideas of your own, please drop them in the comments, because Ghost Ship Games employees do read these comments and they do care about your opinions. I am very excited to follow the development of Rogue Core and see where it ends up. I'm a huge fan of roguelite games, so seeing a Deep Rock Galactic twist on my favourite genre of games was certainly not on my 2025 bingo card, but I won't be complaining. Thanks again for letting me rant for this long, rock and stone, and I will see you in next week's video.